We want to welcome you to Torah on the Go. I am here with Rabbi Feinstein, and we are featuring our new Torah on the Go mug.
Don't be without it.
Don't be without it. I want to thank Colin Plume for creating the Torah on the Go mug, the first of its kind. And on one side, it's got Torah on the Go, and on the other side, it has a picture of yours truly. And I have to tell you that it fits the perfect amount of coffee. So thank you, Colin, for the Hanukkah gift. Thank you for being a fan of the podcast and for supporting us. We are going to have a very special conversation today dedicated to the holiday that we're celebrating. Is it Rosh Hashanah? No, you don't have tickets. Is it Passover? No, we haven't turned over our kitchens. It is the holiday of Tu B'Shvat. I was waiting for you to sing the song. That's what I was waiting for. Tu B'Tubi. And so why do we celebrate Tu B'Shvat? Tu B'Shvat is a new year for the trees, for the environment, and also it's kind of become an Earth Day for the Jewish people. The tradition can be traced all the way back to Genesis, to the book of Genesis, Sefer Breshit. In the second chapter of Genesis, the Torah tells us, Vayikach Adonai Elohim et Adam, God takes man, humankind, v'necheu began Eden, and settles him in the Garden of Eden, le'avda v'leshamareha, to work it, to till it, and also to protect it. So we're both supposed to work the earth and to steward the earth in so many ways. The rabbis then bring a teaching, the first teaching in the Mishnah of Masechet Rosh Hashanah, that there are 4 New Years during the calendar. One of them, of course, is the New Year that we know, Rosh Hashanah. The other New Year is Tu B'Shvat, the New Year for the trees. We combine both of these ideas, kind of feed into the holiday today, and we eat fruits and nuts from the trees that are produced in Israel, and we recite the blessing on fruit from the trees. And Rabbi Feinstein.
Originally, it was tax day on trees. I mean, it started, no, really.
Right.
It started out very prosaically. You owe a tax on harvest from the trees depending on the year of the tree, if it's the first year, second, third, or fourth year. So how do you measure who remembers when the tree was planted? It's every year on Tu B'Shvat, every tree in the community turns another year old. And so that's how you determine that your taxes on your trees were due.
So instead of the 15th of April, it's the 15th of Shvat.
Right, that's exactly what it was. But so then, of course, when we left Israel, scattered to the diaspora, the mystical, poetic minds of the tradition took hold of this and said, gee, New Year for trees, what could that mean? And that's where you get a holiday that meditates, first of all, on trees as a metaphor for something, a symbol. And then beyond that, as you said, the commitment we have to care for the earth, which is a more modern reflection of the holiday.
So the real question is, what role do we have as rabbis and as Jewish leaders to help instill this value in people, right? Today, Valley Beth Shalom is making an announcement that we're embarking on the largest solar panel project, I believe, of any synagogue in North America.
Really?
Yeah, we're installing solar panels within the next year, and we're going to try to make our campus as green as possible. Maybe we'll be the largest solar panel project in the universe, any synagogue in the universe, I should say. I'll change it from North America to until somebody comes along and tells me they have a larger solar panel project, I'll keep going.
I'm sure somebody, yeah.
What role do you think we have as rabbis in instilling this as a value in our people?
Well, again, I love that verse that God puts man, the human being, into the garden, and it says to work it, to cultivate it, and to protect it. Now, first of all, if you ever wondered what your purpose was in life, that's it. You've been put into the world to protect and cultivate the world that God created around you. And then more than that, that comes with a sort of sense of stewardship, a sense of protection of the environment. The environment is not a resource to be exploited. The natural environment around us is us. We're in it and we're part of it. So the whole ecological movement that began in the 70s and the environmental movement that has grown from it, I think has a very deep root within our tradition. The kids at the school, incidentally, we have recycling cans all over the campus. So the kids in a day school once came to me and they said, is it a mitzvah to put our cans and bottles in the recycling bin? And I said, absolutely. And they said, yeah, how do you know? And I said, because it says in the Torah, L'shamra Elovda, you're to take care of the earth. They said, well, if it's a mitzvah, there has to be a bracha. What's the bracha for recycling? That's a wonderful question. I mean, it gives you a sense of these kids and how they're thinking through the tradition. So we made up a bracha. I mean, you're not allowed to actually make up a bracha, but we made up a bracha. And we took that verse, and it's Baruch atah melech haolam, asher kidshanu mitzvotav etzivanu, God who has sanctified us with commandments and commanded us, lishmor et hagan, to protect God's garden, to protect God's world.
It's beautiful.
And that attitude that I am made kadosh, I am lifted up, I am made more godly by a gesture of caring for the environment, even a minor thing like putting the can in the right basket, I think is part of the attitude that you're trying to inculcate.
It's fascinating to me that the rabbis have to inform us that there are multiple New Years during the year, and that the calendar that we're on, that we're absorbed in, of our own lives, might not necessarily be the calendar for the earth. And how many people sit on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and think about the trees, think about the earth, think about the environment, think about these issues? I think it's actually crucial to designate one day, like you said, whether it began as, this is the day that we understand trees are 3 years old and we can now begin removing its fruit, which is according to the Jewish tradition when we start doing that, according to Orla. But whether it started like that or whether it started with a real intentionality that we're in relationship with nature, I think it's important to understand and to convey to the community that one day a year we should stop and really reflect on our relationship with the environment around us, and the impact that we have on it.
And trees, there's something about trees. I remember as a little kid, my mom was driving us through the neighborhood, and there was a neighbor who was cutting down a tree, an old tree. And my mother began to cry. Mamish was mourning for this tree. And I said to her, Mom, what are you, she said, do you know how old that tree is? And who are they to come? A tree represents something that it's the sort of transcendent quality of something that's much older than we are, and yet living within us, among us, around us. And the idea of time, the idea of it's a metaphor for so many of our deepest hopes, that we can root ourselves in a place and grow, and that would sustain for generations and generations. And the idea that a neighbor was cutting down a tree because he wanted to put in a swimming pool or something was such a violation of my mother's sense of reverence for the past and reverence for the future. A tree represents that investment in a future. All over the Tanakh, all over the Bible, this notion of you're like a tree planted by the water. Right. And then in the rabbinic tradition, this idea that I plant for the next generation. Right. The famous story of Choni, who sees a fellow planting fruit trees. And he says, you're a fool, old man. You'll never see the fruit of those trees. And he says, you see those trees in the distance? As my ancestors planted for me, I will plant for the next generation. The tree is a metaphor for that kind of concern, that transcendent concern. I'm going to invest in the world, not for my own benefit, but so that those who come after me will be able to harvest the goodness that I intend for them and enjoy it. And there's reverence for that.
The ultimate tree metaphor, of course, for the Jewish people is the Torah itself.
Eitz Chaim.
Eitz Chaim. I mean, we lift the Torah at the end of the Torah reading section of the service, and we recite the words Eitz Chaim hi lemachazikim ba, right? It is a tree of life to those who hold on to it.
Right.
And so Tu B'Shvat has a literal meaning in the sense that we eat fruits and nuts from trees that were produced, the fruits and nuts that are produced in Israel that we now purchase here at Whole Foods, and we give them to the kids in the preschool, and we all eat them and act as though they were delivered from Eretz Yisrael. And also we reflect on the responsibility of it, and there's the metaphor of it all.
Right. Right. So it's interesting. Listen, if you go back to your metaphor again, it's always interested me that God puts the human being into a garden. Think about that for a second. Why doesn't he put him into a city? Why doesn't he put him into a palace? Why doesn't he put him into a fortress? Or why does he just leave him in the world? But the idea that God plants a garden. Think of the garden as a metaphor. Garden is such an interesting metaphor because it's a meeting place between nature in all of its beautiful fruitful chaos, and an artist, a gardener, someone who cares for it, where human artistry, human agency meets natural fruitful power. And that kind of, it's such a beautiful metaphor for the natural world. God puts us into a garden and says, here, take care of the garden, take care of my world. It's not, it does have its own sort of impulse to grow, but it's going to be, you have to take care of it. And the beautiful thing about a garden is that everything is symbiotic. Everything is there aesthetically and biologically to care for each other and to look good together. And it's just a beautiful metaphor for the attitude we take toward a natural world.
And we are a nomadic people.
Yeah.
The story of the Torah is actually the Jewish people, the entire human narrative, leaving a garden and being attracted to the city. And it's a polemical story. The city carries with it dangers that the garden doesn't have.
Right. The Bible hates cities.
The Bible hates cities.
Right.
And
Cain founds the first city.
That's right.
Right. And every city is a place of danger and moral decrepitude.
We're constantly attracted to Egypt. We travel to Egypt in Genesis, in Exodus. We'll talk about that. And when the Jewish people come to finally make it to Eretz Yisrael, and Joshua leads us in, the first place we go is a city.
Right.
Right. We encounter the women of the night there, right? It attracts us to the city. We go to destroy a city in Jericho, and we ultimately are on a drive to build the city for God, which is Jerusalem. David conquers Jerusalem and builds it as the eternal political and spiritual capital of the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. The entire time, with God telling us to shy away from this. The garden is actually what we should strive for. And Jewish leaders come along through history and explain to us that they yearn to return back to that garden. The most iconic image I can think of is David Ben-Gurion in Sde Boker at the end of his life. After building so much of the infrastructure of Israel, so much of the urban planning he's responsible for, he ends up himself retiring to a place of a garden, to a kibbutz in the middle of the Negev, devoting his legacy to trying to make the Negev bloom, the desert bloom.
Yeah. So think. There's two more things. Number one is think of the holiday of Sukkot. Mm-hmm. You are told to leave your home and go out and live outside. So I want you to leave whatever city you're living in and go live out in nature. Go live in the garden for a week and recover the purity and the intentionality of someone who is deeply connected to the earth. That's Sukkot. That's what Sukkot was supposed to be. The other one is Shemitah, this idea that every 7 years the fields lie fallow and you live off the land, which means that in a certain way you're letting go of the arrogance that you're controlling the earth. Right. And for 1 year, the earth controls you. For 1 year, the earth tells you what the rhythm of life is going to be. And then you can come back after that and go back to farming again. But it's a crazy radical idea. Don't think that you control nature. You are in partnership with nature. You are symbiotic with nature, and I have to keep reminding you of this.
So we've been in many ways capitalists since our beginning. We've always understood that we could own parcels of land. The first story is Abraham trying to purchase a place to bury his wife, and at the same time we've had a tension with this in terms of who actually owns the earth. Yeah. Judaism has gone out of its way. Shemitah is a great example. The rabbis have gone out of their way to explain that even if someone has a debt, every 7 years we kind of reassess that. And we've come up with legal fictions to say, we get through these periods of time because we recognize that we actually don't own the earth completely. And Tu B'Shvat is a reminder of that tension, a reminder that we are proudly working and owning of our businesses and industry, and we want people to be successful, and we want that success to exist in coexistence with the natural world.
Yeah, because there's a sense of oneness to this.
That's right.
The sense of what we put into the world is going to come back to us. And, we see this now, the global warming, the crisis of global warming, which is such an interesting crisis because it's so subtle in how it comes upon us, and yet no one can say I'm responsible for it. It's the sort of ultimate test of the sense of human responsibility, and yet its effects are going to be quite dire for our kids and our grandchildren. So we've done this to the world. Now the question is, with what responsibility do we attach ourselves to a solution? That's going to be that's a very interesting challenge for the next generation.
So on that happy note, everyone go out to a grocery store, find a piece of fruit.
Hug a tree.
Hug a tree.
Tell the tree happy birthday.
Recite a blessing, boreh pri ha'etz, make a blessing over the fruit of a tree.
Right.
And enjoy Tu B'Shvat. Happy Tu B'Shvat. And I'd like to close this episode by acknowledging one of the questions that we received online. So we have incredible viewership all across the galaxy. People listen to our podcasts like crazy. And they send us mugs and they send us these questions. And so I want to thank Roy Young from Beverly Hills, far away in Beverly Hills. I'd like to thank Roy Young.
Another world.
Another world completely. Take your passport. And Roy wants to know, how do we make our day good as God made each day of creation good?
Good question.
What guidance does the Torah and Judaism more broadly give us Jews? So first of all, thank you, Roy, for listening. And thank you for coming up with a question that's so related with the story of Genesis. How would you begin to answer that, Rabbi?
How do you make each day good? Well, what's wonderful about the story in creation is that God is this creator. And the creator takes joy for the creation. There's a sort of almost a childlike sense of joy. Look what we just did. Giraffes, galaxies. There's a sense of joy in the world, in being. And I think that's the beginning of it. But the deepest thing, I think, ethic is an ethic of oneness. When you read the book of Genesis, when you read the story of Genesis and the creation, you notice that creation rolls out of God. There's no artifice, there's no effort. It's just let there be. And then God creates the human being, in one story in the image of God. So there's a oneness between God and God's creation. There's a oneness between God and the human being. The other story, God creates the human being from the dust of the earth. So there's a oneness between us and the earth, the natural world. And then in the first story, God creates the human being, male and female, in the same gesture. In the second story of creation, God creates the woman from the side of the man. It's all about being one. And so you walk outside, instead of seeing myself as an independent, separate, isolated self, acting upon a world as my object. If I look upon the world, and particularly those about me, as part of me, as an extension of me, the great ethic is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You will love the other who is yourself, who is just like you, who is part of yourself. If I walk the world and see that the world is part of me, and I am part of the world, and the other, the person I meet, the colleague, the friend, the spouse, the person who works for me, the beggar on the street, the homeless person, they're all part of my story. They're part of my being. And I treat them that way. Then I walk the world with a deep sense of responsibility, but also a deep sense of connection. And that's what the Torah calls good.
So I'll add 2 points onto that beautiful sentiment. The first being, in everything that God creates, it's all in a very selfless manner. Mm-hmm. God creates for the benefit of this thing that God is creating that we now know as the world, mm-hmm. the human experience, the natural order, however we want to think of it. And if we woke up every day with an intentionality to act selflessly for others, mm-hmm. how do we make our spouse, our partner's life better? How do we make our kids' lives better? How do we make our community better? How do we make society better? Whatever it is that's the intentionality, if it comes from a place of selflessness, mm-hmm. I think you'll end up with a goodness at the end of the day. You'll end up with understanding that you lived your life with a sense of purpose and meaning, and you brought benefit to this world.
Yes, I wouldn't say selfless. I would just put it this way. What is self? Where are the boundaries of self? For some people, the boundaries of self right at the tip of their nose. They see themselves as isolated and everyone is out there. I am subject, they are object. What the Torah is trying to do is open up your sense of self.
Agreed.
So for someone who is in a loving relationship, the other, my spouse, my partner, is part of me. What hurts her hurts me double. And what brings her joy brings me joy, right? For others, it's children, family. For more, it's a community, right? For others, it's much wider than that. To keep opening the boundaries of self is what the Torah's whole ethical project is. God is the circle that includes everybody and everything. And every time I open myself and include another, as you said, that's getting a little bit more godly in my life, a little more closer to the divine in my life.
The only other point that I'll make is when we talk about a good day, like in the story of Genesis, it says Vayar Elohim ki tov. It was good. Yeah. And I feel like too many people today are absorbed with perfection, not good. And the story doesn't tell us that God saw the world and thought it was perfect.
Yeah.
Good should be the threshold. That should be the target for our actions. And sometimes we'll really strike a chord and it'll be very good. Mm-hmm. Very good. That was creating humanity, was very good. Nobody reaches perfection, not even God. Not even God. And I think we have to be a little bit more forgiving of ourselves as well. Yeah. If you want to have a good day, occasionally cut yourself some slack. Cut yourself some slack and understand that on days that you think are not as good, perhaps they're better than you think.
Yeah. I think you should tell Mr. Young the real truth, which is that it won't be a good day until baseball season starts in April.
Pitchers and catchers report in just a few weeks, and this is the best time of the baseball season for a Cubs fan.
Because now the Cubs are in first place.
That's right.
Going to the World Series.
Well, I mean, and technically we're tied for first place, but we'll take it right now. Right now, we want the season to be over, and the Cubs can finish tied for first place.
For those of us who are Dodgers fans,
yeah,
we just spent another $5 million zillion trillion
That's right.
on some other player.
Right.
Hope he doesn't hurt himself.
The Dodgers will eventually have so many players that the all-stars will be walking around selling hot dogs and peanuts in the stadium because there won't be enough places in the dugout for all these all-stars.
There won't be anybody in the stadium because the tickets will be too expensive.
So my kids are thrilled as Dodger fans, but as Cub fans, this is the best time of year, and to read the blogs is a moment of promise. So, Mr. Young, thank you very much for sending us the question. We have other questions for our upcoming podcasts as well. On behalf of the clergy at Valley Beth Shalom, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day and spending just a few moments with us to study Torah and to reflect on life. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Happy Tu B'Shvat.
Go hug a tree.